Welcome, everyone, to the Goddess Vibration Podcast. This is Ali.
And this is Tiara.
Before we begin today's discussion, I just want to share that Tiara and I were a guest on a podcast called The Time Is Now by Jody Albert Moss. He is from Canada and he is very passionate about his light work and he has a million different projects going on. And I just wanted to give a shout out and a thank you for having us on. We had a fantastic discussion about channeling, the gift of channel, and as well as AI. And we kind of went down the rabbit hole of the gift of channel first. And we just really want to highlight that anyone who is a channeler or gets downloads or has the gift of mediumship, that it's not everything that people may think it is. And we wanted to get into that discussion because there is a lot of distortions with channeling. And also, there is a lot of warnings that should come with channeling. And Tiara and I are going to do our own separate episode when it comes to that. And in terms of the AI piece, we just explored the technology and like it should be used as a tool, but I feel like people are becoming very reliant on it, like dependable on it, and it really should just be used as a tool. And I think it's a wonderful tool when used correctly. And we went into the pros and cons of AI, and it was a fantastic discussion. Please go check out his podcast. He's on Spotify. He posted the session on YouTube, and he's across all these social media platforms. So thank you again, Jody. And I'll let Tiara put in her 2 cents.
Yeah, I actually had a lot of fun recording with Jody, and he's so enthusiastic about our show and the work that we do, and super supportive. And it was a really great experience. I actually ended up finding him on Reddit, which is it's interesting because oftentimes we are sharing content online. People don't always buy it, some people do. So it's always nice to make those rare connections where it's like, we're kind of on the same page and we're kind of sharing journeys. And we kind of did a little bit of that too. So it was a fantastic experience. I had a great time. And, big shout out to Jody Aaron Moss for taking us up and on that offer of being on the show and allowing us the space to chat with him. And there's a possibility we might do a couple additional episodes with him. So, yeah, you guys, please go check him out. He's a great guy.
I just want to correct Tiara. It's Albert, not Aaron.
Jody Albert Moss.
Correct. So, for today's discussion, we are going to talk about the soul versus the incarnate. Now, some of you may be asking yourself, what does that mean? So, I'm an soul integration life coach, and basically the work that I do is I really focus on the soul's journey. Now, anyone who's into spirituality, if you believe in reincarnation, then you have past lives. And so soul integration is really being able to get access to the soul, find out about your past lives, the soul origin, where the soul is from, how old the soul is, the soul name, roughly how many times have you reincarnated, learn about traits about the soul. And the reason why we want to have this discussion today is because the more work that I do in this, and I know like Tiara also dabbles in it. Sometimes we do some work together, just depending on what's going on. We have both noticed that the traits of the soul are actually very prominent with traits of the incarnate, the human incarnate. And we thought that this would be a very interesting discussion.
Yeah, and when we started exploring some of the similarities, like it was uncanny. Like we know that there are multiple aspects of the self, but it's just so interesting when you start doing some of this stuff and you start doing some of the channeling and interacting with these energies. How many traits of the soul come through on the incarnates, like at the conscious level? Like more than I think we recognized or realized initially. So it's just been really fascinating to observe. And like I know for myself, I am very familiar with the specific traits of my soul. And I have actually been able to kind of pinpoint what those traits are and how they're affecting me as the incarnate. Mostly because I know that, you know, my soul has a lot of trauma, but I'm seeing the impact of the trauma at the incarnate level and what I have to overcome. That was stuff that she was carrying. Like, it's just really mind boggling, like the parallels. And we've even observed similar traits, quirks, features, and even things like that. So it's just like my mind is still unpacking it and the implications and what it means. But man, it's a total rabbit hole.
It is a total rabbit hole. It's actually extremely wild. So I know a little bit about my soul history, and I should know more considering the fact that I'm a soul in that I do soul integration work, but I know enough that I actually never thought about it until Tiara and I were having this discussion where she was like, "I carry so many traits of my soul." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she was saying, "Well, I carry a lot of the similar wounding from the trauma from past lives." And she strongly believes that it has been carried out through so many past lives. And I didn't even think about it, truthfully. I was just like, "Okay, that's interesting, but that also makes a lot of sense." And we only had this discussion a few days ago. And then I have the gift of channel. And so I kind of was talking to my soul a little bit. And my soul was like, "You have so many traits of mine." And I didn't even consider it or think about it. And then I was like, "Okay, well, let's go down this rabbit hole together." And I'm learning, wow, like I do have a lot of your traits. And I have done past life regression on myself. And so I've learned that like a lot of my past incarnates have actually carried a lot of her traits. And I was like, you know what? This is a thing. This is a very real thing. And we just had to bring it to our podcast.
So I want to clarify a little bit because oftentimes when we're kind of delving into this space, there's a little bit of confusion about the role of the soul versus the role of the incarnate. And as I understand it, the role of the incarnate is to overcome the destructive traits, whether that's like, you know, healing or self-reflection, introspection, gaining self-awareness, so that the soul takes that learning and can evolve and grow. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page with that.
Right. I mean, it makes sense, right? It's like every lifetime we are given a soul contract. We come to Earth because we're all here on Earth right now. And we have a roadmap to how we're supposed to live our lives, but it kind of gets complicated with this crazy thing called free will that is
Right.
in huge debate. And I'm still learning, and Tiara is too.
I am too. And it seems to me that as an incarnate, your biggest challenge is the ego and the influence of the ego. Because as long as the ego, at least for me, that's been my biggest challenge. And as long as the ego is still has that deep influence over you, especially as you're continuing to carry the same trauma from prior lives and events that happened in this lifetime, it's really difficult to do what the incarnate's supposed to do, which is like overcome those blocks, learn new lessons, integrate and apply those lessons. So, we've kind of been observing that too, not just with like our souls, but with other souls we've interacted with, that the influence of the ego is huge and seems to me to be one of the biggest hindrances for a lot of individuals who come here with their soul contracts and want to overcome those blockages. So there's so many different layers to it, but like as we continue to learn about what this is, what it means, what it entails, I am discovering again a lot when it comes to me, especially that the ego is probably one of the biggest hurdles. Again, at least for me, it's been.
I would say that the ego is the biggest hurdle for most people because I see it all the time all over Reddit. How do I get past my ego? What's an ego death? How do I remove the ego altogether? How do I. There's all these questions about the ego. So I believe that, I mean, the ego is a very well known thing, especially in the new age and spiritual community. And I would say the biggest misconception about the ego is, how do I kill my ego forever? And I am of the belief that you cannot kill the ego forever. You can't just kill the ego and make it be dead and it's gone forever. Me personally, I don't think that's a thing.
No, I completely agree. Like, there's this thought that you can kill the ego, like they call it the ego death, and it's in some of the new age circles, it's like this thing that everyone should seek out. Like everyone should seek out an ego death. If it means you need to use substances to get there, like that's just the thing that you should try to do. But I'm just like, yeah, I don't know that that's actually how it's supposed to work. I thought that what we were supposed to be doing is taming the ego, but yeah, I see a lot also in conversation and online about ego death and how it's so revered and it's something that everyone should seek. And I agree fully that I don't think it's possible to fully kill the ego. Like the ego is there to, at least based on what we've discovered, to protect the self. In particular, it's there to protect like that wounded inner self that doesn't feel worthy, doesn't feel good enough, doesn't feel like they can accomplish, or doesn't really have the self worth. And so the ego is kind of there to protect that and creates like this shell of an identity that is based on external successes and external achievements. And, unfortunately, in our society, we put so much focus on external achievements and we make it part of our worthiness. And it's such a distortion and it's really damaging. But unfortunately, that's just kind of how our society operates. I feel like the ego sort of falls in line with that. And then once you start getting to a place where you want to challenge some of that, oh, the ego is going to push back. Like it's going to do whatever it can to protect you because again, that's what the ego does, protects, it's supposed to. But it gets to a point where it also causes harm because now you can't look at that hurt inner person the way you really should be able to unpack why that hurt person is there, where it comes from, how to overcome it. So I do see this a lot as well with ego interference. I still struggle with it all the time. But yeah, ego death isn't, personally, I don't really think it's that realistic. It should really be about balancing out the ego.
Which is easier said than done, by the way. It is very, very difficult to do. It's one of those things where I would say that the ego just does more than protect the incarnate, because the ego tells us like what is best. The issue with being conscious is that because we're conscious beings, most of us operate from the ego, right? It's like, even, and I would say the one thing that the ego carries that is just the hardest part to overcome, and it's one of the seven deadly sins, is pride. And when you add pride into the mix of the ego, it is actually a very, I don't want to use the word dangerous, but I'm going to. It can be a very dangerous thing, because pride makes us feel like we're doing the right thing even when we're not. And pride makes us feel like we have self-worth, but it may not be the right type of self-worth. And pride is kind of integrated into this ego aspect of ourselves. And that's when mm, the healing journey and like needing to look at yourself, that's when it becomes very, very difficult in the healing journey, because that pride is going to tell us that we're in the right, we're the victim, we we were done wrong, therefore something needs to happen to the other person. And so there's also all these other aspects of the ego that I don't think people are very aware of, because we have this thing called pride integrated into it.
Yeah, the pride piece is huge. And you're absolutely right that it like makes you think you're right all the time. Like, even when being pressed or challenged or pushed. And it's wild that the ego does this because it's not, I mean, I get why the ego feels the need to do this, but it's not, at the end of the day, it's not helpful. So it's almost like our ego is our friend, but also our worst enemy. Like, it's both. So I think you're right that pride piece is a reason why so many people struggle because, again, if you're being pressed on some of these things or like your behaviors or how harmful your behaviors are, and your ego is telling you this is why you did that, it makes sense that this is what you did, like I'm right. Like, yeah, it's you're gonna have a hard time navigating through some of the deeper work. Like, just the unfortunate reality of it. So I had this thought about the ego and its influence. I kind of get the impression a little bit that as incarnates, we all have different levels of ego, like different intensities, levels of ego. And I've wondered if for some people, the ego is more influential the more trauma that exists there. Just a thought that I had. I'm not quite sure, but I just wondered that does the ego influence more and have more influence over the incarnate if there is more like karma there?
That's a very interesting thought.
Right. It was just something that kind of popped up as we were having this conversation, and and reflecting in my own experience, and I'm just like, man, is the ego the way it is on, for me, because I do have so much karma from prior lives. Is that influencing the influence of the ego? I've kind of seen that people who have trauma tend to like struggle a little bit more with the ego. So it's just an interesting pattern I've seen. And I just was kind of thinking about it like, I wonder if that's a part of it.
It very well might be. And first of all, everyone has trauma. Everyone has some form of trauma. If it's not in this incarnation, it will be from past lives.
Yes, and I don't think not everyone recognizes that some of the patterns that they have are from prior lives. Like, it's not always that, this lifetime you experienced something that created a trauma that you're struggling from. This stuff could go back multiple lineages. um, through bloodlines. So there's a lot that can influence, the way you are, the struggles you're dealing with today, some of the mental patterns, beliefs. Some of it could come from, any prior life. So it's definitely a lot to consider and think about if you're struggling with navigating through the ego.
So Tiara and I were discussing before we even hit record for this, and I wasn't sure if we were going to go into all these layers because there's so many layers and aspects that make up a person. And I don't want to go into a huge rabbit hole on this, but just kind of give you a short overview. So, the things that we're talking about here, so there's the human incarnate, and then there's different aspects to the human incarnate. So, the soul is one aspect, the ego is its own separate aspect, the spirit or higher self is a completely different aspect. And when you think about all these different aspects, there's different compartments that do different things that make up one human being. Now, I know that that's maybe a lot for some of you to wrap your head around, but they often say that like humans only use like, what is it, 20% of their brain, 25% of their brain. Well, where's the other 75%? It's because there's so much more to a person than just the waking, conscious, everyday aspect of you. There is this thing called an ego. There is this thing called the subconscious. The intuition, it's its own gift, I guess we could say. The intuition is its own gift. And so there's all these things that make up a human being. And so when we're in our conscious waking self, we just think linear. Okay, I'm awake. I got stuff to do. I have my routine. This is my life. But I don't think what Tiara and I absolutely love about spirituality is that like there's just all these different aspects that make up one human being, that make up everything about you. And then it's like you can branch off into all of these different, well, past lives and the soul journey and all of these different things. And the more that we explore these things, the more we realize there are so many different aspects to a human being that make up a human being. And it gets confusing. It can get frustrating. Tiara and I have been there. But at the same time, it's also just exciting and things start to make sense. And then it's like in the healing journey, things start to come full circle and you're just like, whoa. And even though, yes, we do get frustrated, we have talked about quitting multiple times on this podcast. It's honestly, it's those aha epiphany moments and the full circle moments. That's what keeps us going.
Yeah, I've had a couple full circle moments when it comes to the different aspects of the South, particularly in navigating through some of the like perfectionism and control. I guess more or less the control piece, because I do have a soul that in prior lifetimes sought out power and control in multiple different ways. Now, I'm not privy to everything. I just kind of know that this is has been a repeating pattern for her in many, many, many lifetimes, and it's affected us in different ways, particularly affecting my counterpart journey. And once I kind of sat with it a little bit, I was able to see the parallels between the different ways that she sought power and control and the ways that I was doing it in this lifetime. Like, for example, trying to control outcomes because I didn't feel confident in being able to like surrender and create an outcome intuitively. Now, I'm probably a little bit different. I've talked multiple times on the show about like, being a split soul and how, no emotional body, blah, blah, blah. So, I think I have unique challenges in that regard, but it's just been so fascinating to see how those things have affected her in prior lives, some of the things she did, and seeing the parallels with the same way it's affected me in this life. Like, it's just been so enlightening. And again, it's that kind of stuff that makes spirituality so interesting and so fascinating. And, it's so multifaceted. So, yeah, absolutely. Like, I've been seeing it again, still working through some of this stuff. I do think that there's a lot of stuff that she's carrying that like I haven't fully unpacked. And so it's still a journey. Like, it's still introspecting and it's still unpacking and uncovering. And the more that I discover, the more I find it fascinating. I mean, yeah, like obviously that makes life difficult when you have that belief that you need to control every aspect. It makes life 100% more difficult. But it's helpful to know what it is and why it's there, and that I, as an incarnate, have the opportunity to change course.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we face when we dive into this type of work when there's ego involved and pride involved.
Oh, can you imagine being someone who's hell bent on power and control, and then also having the pride tied to that as well? Like when I say uphill mountain, I don't know if I can fully put that into words. It's it requires a lot of energy and effort. And the reason why is because, you know, when you've had multiple lifetimes doing the same thing over and over, it becomes very, very deeply embedded, like very, very deeply embedded. So you have to put in that much energy and effort to overcome the same thing. And when there's pride involved, it's just another layer because now you have to unpack, okay, when it comes to this sense of pride, like, is it realistic? Where is it coming from? Has it been destructive? In what ways has it been destructive? Like, all of that comes into play. So it's really just about humbling yourself. And I know that because for me, that has been there, that I've taken, I call them ego beatings or like ego bruises, like where you kind of beat down on the ego a little bit. But like, I feel like for me, I needed that. Like, I needed that external, mostly coming from Ali and her team, to like push back at the ego and that sense of pride and like, bruise it a little bit because that's how embedded it was. And that's very difficult work. Like I don't know that I would recommend that for most people getting started on this journey. If you're kind of at that state where you're like, hey, I want to do some of the deeper soul integration, okay, then maybe, but it takes a while to build up to a place where you can even take that kind of quote unquote beating because it does push back on that protective layer that the ego has created. And it makes you go and look at that hurt person in there who has been protected by the ego for so long. And that's not easy work. Like, I admit that that's not easy to do. The ego will continually continue to push back because, the ego is protective. But like, overcoming the pride, um, first and foremost, is probably going to need to be prioritized when it comes to doing this kind of stuff, especially if you know that you're the type of person who is, I call it sometimes egomaniac, where like your pride is just like your central focus and identity. Like, you take so much pride in everything that you do. Maybe you have a lot of external achievements and maybe you built yourself around these external achievements and made it your identity. Like, it's going to be a process to go back and examine what those external achievements are and if they truly mean anything or if they're just there to bolster your pride. It's very, very humbling, but it also brings more inner peace and inner calm over time. It's like takes a while, it takes effort, it does take energy, it takes a lot of self reflection, being able to build up some more awareness, but it is absolutely possible.
It's absolutely possible. And something else that I want to highlight with the pride, you guys, and this is probably the biggest hurdle. Pride's going to put you in victimhood. I've been there. Tiara's been there. And it takes a very high level of self awareness to really snap yourself out of victimhood. And I would say working with Tiara, that was one of the biggest hurdles. And we're still going through it to this day. I have to point out, you've just turned yourself into a victim. She hates it, but she also knows that it's for her best and highest.
Yes, victimhood energy is huge, huge, huge. And now I don't quite know why the ego reverts to victimhood. It's again, I think maybe it's just a protective thing, but I do even see that a lot just like carousing online, like, Reddit, for example, and just people talking about their journeys and how hard it's been, and people did this to them, and because people did this to them, they don't want to go on anymore, and the world is evil, and their family is evil. And yeah, when you're in that state of mind, you're going to struggle because the work that you should be doing to overcome some of those, the programming that you've gotten from your past or from your childhood or from prior lives, it gets like shadowed by victimhood energy. And I know that absolutely this is something that I still struggle with. I know it was something that my twin even struggles with and still struggles with to this day because, we're still energetically connected. I can kind of sense some of the stuff he's still carrying. But yeah, I don't know why victimhood is such a huge thing. I think you're right. It's tied in with pride. And like, yeah, it is another layer that has to be overcome if you want to get past the limitations of the ego.
Victimhood was definitely the hardest thing for me to overcome because there was a lot of wrong done to me. And I was so focused on all the external things that was done to me. And what really snapped me out of it was when I had to go inward and then look at my behavior that may or may not have triggered some of those external things to happen to me. Like, what was it about me that made people want to do those things to me? What was it? Was it my behavior? Was it something I said? Was it something I did? And a lot of people, that's really hard for people to look at and ask themselves those questions and be able to replay the scenario in their head to really figure out, okay, oh, maybe it was because I did that. And maybe it was because, it's something I did say or didn't say. Because people can get triggered even if you don't say anything. Like, people could be triggered because they want a response from you and you don't say anything. And the person on the other end of that could just be like, well, why didn't they respond to me? Like, what did I do? And so communication is not just verbal communication. I would say even more importantly, the nonverbal communication is actually bigger than verbal communication. And something that I have really been working on and mastering throughout my whole life, and this is one thing about being like bullied and a loner, is that I've had a lot of time to kind of reflect and learn about nonverbal communication. And I would say that the reason why I have such a strong presence in communication is because I know how to verbally communicate, but I also know how to non verbally communicate. because I've had people often ask me, they're just like, how do you just know things, or like they didn't even say anything, and how do you know things? And it's just because, I mean, there's multiple layers to this, but I know a big part of that is that am very good with nonverbal communication. And so it it is important that you get to know yourself, because the more that you get to know yourself, the more that you can start to understand other people around you. And that work, although again, unpleasant, because it's not easy to look at yourself. It's not easy to look at your behaviors and kind of pinpoint, okay, something's wrong in this interaction, or something is wrong in this relationship, or something is wrong with my coworkers, or something is wrong with whoever. It's not always them. There's a very strong possibility that it's also because of you. And I just want more people to think about that or be aware of that, because we do need to exist in this world. Like, I mean, there are other people around us all the time. I mean, it's just, unless you're gonna go run away and be in the woods somewhere and live by yourself, we are gonna have to interact with people. And so we only have a very short lifespan on this planet, and it is important to like seize life and make meaningful connections, and you know, just live, but live in a way that's like authentic to you. And that's really hard for people to get there, because people don't want to put in the healing work. And it's really disheartening and sad. Like, as a person who is a life coach, I'm just like, your life doesn't have to be the way that it is. Like, your life could be so much better. It's just, it is scary work. And I know people know it's scary work, which is why so many people are turned off by it. But there's just so many benefits of actually going through this type of work.
And talking about, I want to go back to the victimhood piece because, you were talking about how you realized that there were things that were done to you that were wrong. And I think for myself, I recognize that too. But my my ego did this thing where it was like, well, those things don't matter. Who cares about those things? Like, you're better anyway. Um, which was interesting because I
In
know
what
that
regard?
so for example, when I was in middle school, I was bullied too. I was bullied quite heavily. Um, and I know that that affected me at some level, but like my ego was just like, well, just forget about it. Forget about them. Forget about it. If you get the chance to burn that school down, just do that instead. Like, just like the ego doing the ego, what it does. So it wasn't really until I got older that I had the chance to even reflect on how the bullying may have impacted me. And I'm wondering if my ego did the same thing with my divine counterpart. Now, I know that we feel victimized in different ways, but we've also hurt each other. And the initial time that I know I hurt him quite deeply, like my ego made no like qualms about it, didn't even recognize that or fathom that that's something that even happened. It wasn't until we reconnected nearly 8 years later that I started to get a sense of how it may have affected him. And so it's interesting how when it comes to victimhood, the ego sort of does this protective thing too. Like it kind of blocks you from seeing the way you may have victimized someone else. And then, at least again, this is my experience, and then also kind of shields the way you may have been victimized, which I just thought was very interesting as you were talking about that. Now, that doesn't mean I still don't carry victimhood energy. I do think a lot of it is from other lifetimes and the experience within my soul family. There is that victimhood energy there when it comes to that I wasn't consciously aware of until like later. But it's just interesting how the ego can even get involved when it comes to victimhood or being a victim. because it wants, again, wants to protect you, wants to make you feel like everything's great and dandy, that you're perfect and that you don't have any flaws. So I just thought that was interesting.
You keep saying that the ego is solely there to protect, and I don't know if I fully agree with that. I do believe that it's there to protect you, but I mean, there's just so many distorted things that come with the ego.
Oh yes, absolutely. I think that the protection piece is just one component of what the ego's there to do. I don't think that that's everything. It's just I feel like the ego kind of it gets taken to an extreme to the point that it becomes a hindrance.
Right. I mean, the ego influences the incarnate.
Correct. Yes. Oh
So
yes.
the ego influences the carnate, the soul influences the carnate. We do have a higher self that, is a very, very either loud voice or very, very soft voice that most people don't even hear. And the higher self wants you to become the highest version of yourself, which is probably why it's so quiet because you have to get through the ego.
Yes.
So there's a lot of different aspects that just make up a human being. And as we work with each aspect, because Tiara and I have worked with each aspect, I know how crazy that may sound. And trust me, it's a headache sometimes. It's still all fascinating, but still a headache. And we're learning, like, because we know some of these people, right? And we know that we know the incarnate, we know them on a personal level, we know them on even a romantic level sometimes, depending on who it is, situation or whatever. And I'm just like, and as I get to learn about these aspects of these human beings, I'm just like, wow, you carry a lot of the same traits as the soul does or as the ego does. And it's just really mind boggling about all the parallels that make us who we are today. And it's really wild.
Yes. So it goes to show that humans are very complex, multifaceted, multi-level beings with multiple aspects that may or may not need attention depending on the depth of the healing and the work they're doing.
Well, I mean, everyone says that human beings are multidimensional beings. And then, I mean, that's
Right.
a whole different other rabbit hole of being multidimensional. It's just like, I don't think it ever ends. I don't think it ever stops.
I don't think so either. I even recently had the experience of channeling my emotional body, which is connected to my twin soul, which was very, very interesting. And again, just goes to show that there are so many different energetic layers of the self that kind of all have their own different responsibilities and roles and influences. And I will say the experience, for the most part, was very positive. It was very insightful. It was beautiful in some ways. And it allowed me to get a little bit more insights into what my twin soul is carrying because again he's the emotional body, I'm the mental body. So you know between us oh god, between us there's maybe like 16 layers of the self. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, okay, that's not normal for most people. I just need to throw that out there. It is crazy. And I don't know. It's just one of these things that the more that we get to know ourselves, it's like, I would say the more we get to know ourselves, the easier the healing journey becomes. Because I want to just highlight that there are benefits of going through all the darkness. There are benefits of going through all of these layers of yourself. You learn about yourself. And the more you learn about yourself, the easier it is to process things because life is a roller coaster and healing never ceases. No one is ever done. Healing never ceases. I'm going to repeat that Because I think people think like, "Oh, okay, I need to get to 5D, and once I'm in 5D, it's over. Yay, I can live my life and I don't have to like work on anything else and life's going to be all great." And I am not of the belief of that. I believe that healing is never going to cease. There is always things to learn about yourself and discover about yourself. And I have learned that the m- because here's the other thing that I want to tack on to this is that life is not going to stop until you pass. And so you might think like, "Oh, okay, I did the healing work. I'm in a great place." Well, life is going to continue on, meaning you may be going through a breakup, you may make a new friend, you may start a new relationship, and you're going to have to navigate those, right? It's like life is not just going to stop just because you think that you've reached your destination in your spiritual journey. And the thing is about as long as you are alive on this planet, they will continue to send tests your way. They will continue to test you. They will bring new people into your life. They want to see and they want to know, like, okay, how much have you grown? Or, are you like, what have you learned? And so life is going to test you. And I know that I have been tested a lot, especially particularly in the last 12 months. And I have been able to compare myself to like an older version of me, to a newer version of me. And I know what I still need to work on. I know like where I've made my improvements. And that's the thing about healing. And as long as you are alive, things are still going to happen to you. And I, s- I swear you're being tested.
I'm so glad you said that piece about healing never ceasing, because I've seen so many people that are just like, I've done all my healing, I'm all done now. Where's my divine counterpart? I've worked through everything, I'm done. Like I see it so much, and I wonder if it's just the ego making us think these things because, you know, I agree. I don't think healing ever ceases. I don't think that you'll ever stop having those insights about yourself or those like aha moments about the way you are. I don't think that ever goes away. It just kind of happens in different ways and in different areas of your life. So it's so interesting that that whole concept and idea that healing is like one destination and that we're all done is so right. Like I didn't realize how prominent that was. And I carry that too.
Oh, I know you did. And that was one of the things like Tiara and I are very, very close, you guys. I mean, obviously, we're best friends. Known each other for 12 years, and I trigger Tiara like on the daily.
Yes, I am daily triggered, but she's right that I recognize that it's needed and necessary. And again, I call it ego bruising, but I've benefited from it. Again, personally, that's just me. That tactic has worked for me. Um, Obviously, there's still things I'm going to continue to be triggered about, and I recognize that and understand that. So, again, it's a process, and you do have to be really patient with yourself. You have to extend compassion towards yourself and understand that the whole focus and goal is to have something better in your life and to be better and to find more peace. Because who doesn't want that?
Right. And as you're tested, like I said, I mean, it's like when you can actually really like apply all the things that you continue to learn about yourself, which is why I believe that we continue to be tested, is because we need to learn. Like that's how we grow. I don't know how else a person can grow without having experiences. I mean, you can learn from a book, but you're also learning things from what another person learned from their experiences. Like nothing's ever going to replace your personal experiences. Like sure, you can get tips from a book, these all these self-help books and self-help podcasts, like they're tools, right? There's valuable information in them. And yeah, you can take some of that valuable information and apply it to your lives. But again, nothing is going to replace you being in it, you being in the trenches, you needing to figure out whatever you need to figure out with whatever life throws at you. And I'm telling you, the more work that you do on yourself, the easier the processes are going to become when life throws challenges your way. And that's why it's so beneficial to do this work and learn as much about yourself as possible because, again, that's when it becomes easier. The more that we just run from ourselves, and I spent many, many, many years running. I mean, started running from the age of 16, and I think I ran for a good almost 10 years. And because I did so much running, I had that much more work I needed to work on myself. And that was the most frustrating part for me. And I was just like, I'm sorry. You want me to go back to childhood? I don't want to relive that. Like, I ran away from that for a reason. I don't want to relive it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about it. And you have to. It's just, yeah, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but yeah, you have to. It's not pleasant, but you have to be able to go through all of those important moments in your life to really learn who you are as a person and why you are the way that you are right now in order to be able to transform. Because without that knowledge, then I mean, without that knowledge, what do you know what you're working on? How do you know what you're working on if you don't have that information? Because if you don't have the information, then you're just kind of like, yeah, I don't know where to go from here. I don't know where to start my healing because I don't I just don't know. And so it you need that information in order to understand, in order to learn, and in order to grow.
Right. I mean, and you can get that information in various ways. I'm personally of the belief that it often requires help or assistance from a third party to really get a more wide angle view of what's affecting you and why it might be affecting you. Because I do think a lot of people struggle with self awareness, and sometimes you just need a third party, whether that's a spiritual coach or a guide or a therapist or a hypnotist, to like at least help find some of it. Now, there are people who swear they can do it by themselves. More power to them. I respect that approach if that's what works for you. Again, personally, for me, that wasn't enough for me. And I don't think it's enough for many people. So, again, we did create a spiritual community tied to not just that, but also some of the channeled wisdom from the team of guides that we have to help people understand and know how to put what they discover into practice in different ways. So it's more or less, I guess, a transformational community, but it is a space that is geared towards being that second set of eyes for some people who feel like they just need someone else to kind of maybe view the blind spots that they don't see. So, you know, that's still there, still available. Higher Vibe Tribe hasn't gone anywhere. And that ultimately is where that came from. The idea for the Higher Vibe Tribe was that sometimes you need support, sometimes you need guidance, sometimes you need help. So I haven't personally seen a space like this anywhere else. I do hope that people could find some type of value in understanding that sometimes you do need a second set of eyes. Again, depends on the person. But I find it highly, highly valuable. It has been for me personally. And I can imagine that perhaps there are some other people out there that might benefit too.
Indeed. I just want to throw something out there real quick about self awareness. And I do want to do an entire episode dedicated to this,
Oh,
but self awareness, I saw some very interesting stats about self awareness where 96% of the, I don't know how many people they surveyed, but 96% of the people believe themselves to have self awareness. And in that study, only like 10% of people actually possess self awareness. And
wow.
yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And I've gone down the rabbit hole of self awareness, and there's two components to self awareness, and most, and I, one of them is more, one of them is obviously more practical and explainable, which is why people think that they have self awareness. But I mean, if you look at that study, you can Google it. 10% out of 96% people thought that they had self awareness. And that is, I'm just saying, I think that speaks volumes to potentially the ego.
Yeah.
I think that that speaks volume to how people really think that they are. And I think that's, again, in order to develop that self awareness that we've just did that whole little segment on, you got to get to know yourself.
Mm,
How can you possess self awareness if you do not know who you are?
mm, absolutely.
So I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. And yeah, I hope you guys take something away from this and, reach out to me if anyone's interested in soul integration because it's wild. I mean, I love the work. I love working with my clients on it. It's so transformational on a completely different level outside of just love and light or psychotherapy or hypnotherapy. It's just learning about all these different aspects of yourself have like been truly transformational and life changing.
Yes. And you will learn things about yourself that there's a good chance you will learn things about yourself that you never even considered or fathomed because, again, her work goes into different aspects of the self that we're not really familiar with. And so there's a good possibility you're going to learn some fascinating things about yourself, and it will change your perspective a little bit. And so when that happens, it's very, very, very helpful because it allows you to see things about yourself that you never noticed before. And that in and of itself is incredibly transformative. It really is.
So, thank you, everyone. And I hope everyone has a fantastic week.
Okay. Thanks, you guys.